Sky This Month with your host, Dave McDonald.
Welcome to the Sky This Month. I'm your host, Dave McDonald, and this is September 2023. It's the month of the autumnal equinox, which is going to happen September 23rd. So you can see behind me Stonehenge, and this is a picture that I took. Had the opportunity to go there with my wife and my daughter at the beginning of July this year, 2003. And in a little bit, I'm going to talk to you a little more about the significance of Stonehenge relative to astronomical occurrences and such. So just off the top of the show here, keep an eye out for our October show next month. We're going to particularly talk about the partial annular eclipse that you will be able to see here in New Hampshire and in various parts of the country. And we're going to talk about International Observe the Moon Night, which will be October 21st. And as the name would imply, International Observe the Moon Night, you're going to be able to see that around the world where it's clear, Saturday, October 21st. And hopefully it'll be clear Saturday afternoon, October 14th, for the partial annular eclipse. And you can go to the McAuliffe Shepherd Discovery Center in Concord, New Hampshire, for Saturday afternoon. There'll be special programming going on there relative to the eclipse. And if you're coming down from the north and you want to stop in Belmont, New Hampshire, right on Route 106 at Bryant Field in Belmont, the Belmont High School Astronomy Club will be featuring solar telescopes for viewing and eclipse glasses available for sale. So Bryant Field in Belmont, the McAuliffe Shepherd Discovery Center in Concord, New Hampshire. Let's talk a little bit about the planets that are happening during September. So Mercury is in the glare of the sun as we start the month, but as we get to the end of September, Mercury will be making an appearance in the morning sky, so you can be on the lookout for that. Venus is already in the morning sky, so after 5 o'clock a.m., it's going to be the brightest object in the east will be the planet Venus, shining at a negative 4.9, its greatest brilliancy, its maximum brilliancy, negative 4.9 in the morning skies of September. So something to look forward to when you're going out early in the morning. Mars is pretty much out of sight unless you have a good western view and some binoculars. It's entering the glare of the sun. It will be in conjunction with the sun in November. So it's continuing to make its way into the glare of the sun. Earth is continuing to pull away from it, so it's getting smaller, it's getting dimmer, and getting into the glare of the sun. So binoculars are necessary if you really want to find Mars, but it's not much to talk about these days. So, and then we have the planet Jupiter. Jupiter is going to be rising after 10 o'clock during September in the east. It'll be the brightest object in the eastern sky, unless the moon's in the area. And shining at a negative 2.8 will be the planet Jupiter, and you can't miss it. Rising before Jupiter, and we're going to take some time in just a minute to talk about Saturn, but just a mention of Uranus and Neptune are available in dark skies. You need binoculars to find them, and I'll just let you look at a star chart online to find Uranus and Neptune. Neptune is in a position we call opposition during September. So this is the best month to try to find Neptune, but you need binoculars. A telescope will really be helpful so you can locate a bluish, dull bluish disk that actually shows a disk rather than a pinpoint of light. But the star, or I should say the planet of the show this month, is Saturn. So Saturn is an awesome planet. It's very, very large. And Saturn is obviously very famous for its ring system. And it is the second largest planet in our solar system, Jupiter being the first largest. 11 Earths can fit across the face of Jupiter. 9 Earths, that's still a lot, can fit across the face of the planet, not including the rings, just the planet Saturn. So it's pretty big. So Saturn is the star of the, I should say, the planet of the show. And Saturn was in a position we call opposition on August 27th. And let's see what that means. So in the next slide here, you see basically the idea of opposition is that Saturn is opposite the Sun. Earth is in the middle. On the one side is Sun. On the other side is Saturn. So in other words, when the Sun sets, Saturn rises. And that was August 27th. But the good news is the whole month of September is a great month for observing Saturn. And Saturn has a variable distance from the Sun. A day on Saturn is pretty quick, about 10.7 hours. So roughly 10 hours and 40 minutes for Saturn, the body of the planet, to rotate. Pretty fast for something that's as large as Saturn. Jupiter is the largest planet in our solar system. You can fit 11 Earths across the face of Jupiter, but you can fit 9 Earths across the face of Saturn. So again, the body of the planet, not counting the rings, is still very huge. But it takes 29 years for Saturn to orbit the Sun once. So let's take a look at the distances. So we have what's called perihelion, which is when Saturn is the closest to the Sun. Perihelion is a mere 835 million miles from the Sun. Earth, just for representation, is 93 on average, 93 million miles from the Sun. So Saturn varies around 9 towards 10 times as far away from the Sun as Earth is. And then you see over on the right, aphelion, which means the furthest away from the Sun. And remember, this orbit that you're looking at is a 29-year orbit. So the furthest Saturn will be away from the Sun is 934 million miles. And currently, right now, September 2023, we're 908 million miles away from the Sun. So that's pretty cool. Saturn boasts an amazing number of moons. So if we look at some of the more popular moons with this slide, you can see that we have Mimas, Enceladus, and the neat thing about Enceladus, you've probably heard, chances are excessively high. It has water, seas, oceans underneath the ice. It spits up or has water geysers, and we know it's H2O geysers that are shooting up from Enceladus. So that's very cool. And we have Tethys and Dione and Rhea. The largest moon, Titan, is further away, as you can kind of see going off the screen to the right. Hyperion, Iapetus, and Phoebe. So those are just some of the more popular, larger named moons. And I was just doing a little bit of research before the show, and it was like not that long ago when Saturn surpassed Jupiter in the number of moons with like 83. And now I look and it's over 100. And I always ask, how big does something have to be, or how small does something have to be to qualify as a moon, whether of Saturn or Jupiter? It seems crazy, but the official count's over 100 now for Saturn. And some of the moons are embedded within the ring system, and that is what we call shepherding moons. See just a really nice glow of the rings of Saturn. And notice there's a tilt to the rings. And that tilt varies. It can get larger or less, more shallow or greater. And it can also be edge-on. And as we approach 2026, the rings are going to be edge-on. The rings are not that thick. The thickness is about as tall as the Prudential building in Boston, 600-ish feet thick. But the width of the rings from edge to edge, we're talking basically it would fit between Earth and the moon. So the ring system makes it a very large diameter. But Saturn is not very dense at all. It's less dense than water, meaning that if you could take Saturn home with you, you could float Saturn in your bathtub. It's not very dense. It's made up of mostly helium and hydrogen. It's a gas giant. It's largely gas. We think there's a core, but there's no surface to land on. And if we look at the next slide, this is the last view of Saturn as the Cassini mission. Cassini orbited Saturn for 13 years, and it met its demise in September 2017, so basically 6 years ago, when it was sent to intentionally crash through the atmosphere. And this is the last image of just a couple days before it met its demise as it was crushed by Saturn's atmosphere. That was September 17th, if I remember correctly. And my STEM class at Belmont High School, we watched it happen live as the signal went away. And these men and women who invested 13 plus years of their lives in the Cassini mission, their job basically came to an end. And then the next day, they're out looking for a job. Kidding a little bit, but it was a very emotional time for those people who spent all that time with the Cassini mission. So if we look at the next slide, this is kind of very cool. This is when the Cassini mission that was orbiting Saturn got into the shadow of Saturn, so that what you see here is the backlighting. So the sun is on the opposite side, Cassini is on the side towards us, and you can see how it has lit up the rings, and you can see that there is actually a ring system that's out beyond the rings that you typically see when you look through a telescope or you see an image. But so that's really kind of very cool. Next slide. The vortices on both the North Pole and the South Pole are these swirling storms. This one is about 1,200 miles in diameter. This is on the North Polar region. And we have about 330 up to 330 mile an hour winds there. So not similar, but not quite the speed of Jupiter's Great Red Spot, or not the size of Jupiter's Great Red Spot, which is about 1.5 Earths, but very sizable that we have at the northern polar region. And then the next image shows the southern polar region, also storminess there. So the poles of these two planets, both Jupiter and Saturn that we're looking at here, have some interesting features, interesting circulation patterns and storms that are going on in both the northern and the southern poles. Now, one thing, this image that you're looking at was taken by the Cassini spacecraft, and I've mentioned the Cassini spacecraft a number of times. And so what spacecrafts have visited Saturn? Well, Pioneer 11 flew by Saturn, and then both Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 flew by Saturn, but Cassini was the only spacecraft that has entered into orbit around Saturn. So, so much information and data and science that we received from the Cassini mission. So that's worth a look up for you. And if you look at the next image, it looks like Saturn is half lit and half in darkness. This is the equinox on Saturn. Isn't that a very cool picture? Half lit. And this is the way Earth would look on the equinox as well. Half of it is lit from pole down to the South Pole, and half of it is in darkness. So, as we go on to the next slide, let's talk just a little bit about the solstices and the equinox. This is Stonehenge, and as I already mentioned, my wife and daughter and I, we went to Stonehenge the beginning of July and learned quite a lot about it. So it's a fascinating set of rocks that are there. And if you go back a couple months, Kelly Beatty spent some specific time talking about the Stonehenge. So I'd suggest you go back and take a peek at the July, or I should say the June program, and learn some real neat specifics about Stonehenge with Kelly Beatty. Now, the next slide, this shows me next to what's called the heel stone, and you see that arrow, and it's going through past the edge of the heel stone towards the stones, and this is pointing towards where you would see the sun set on the winter solstice on the other side of the stones if you're standing right near where I am next to the heel stone. So that's one of the famous images, is the sunset on the winter solstice. Then on the other side, and I actually do, I walk around the whole thing, but as I walk halfway around to the other side of Stonehenge, I look back towards the heel stone, and I'm looking at the sunrise on the summer solstice. And I have a little bit to say about that from the trip, and it was very windy, so you'll hear some wind there, but I think you can make out the words as I report live on videotape from Stonehenge. Where I am standing, you can see over my right shoulder the stones, and beyond, between a couple of the far stones of the circle, you can see the heel stone. So from where I am standing, you can see the sunrise of the summer solstice just over that heel stone at the moment of sunrise. And then during the winter solstice, the direction I am facing and looking at the camera, you would see the sunset, winter solstice. Dave McDonald reporting, Sky this morning. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that little clip. I thought that was kind of fun to put that in there, and I obviously had you guys in mind when I'm there on my trip and such. So let's take a moment, and we're going to change the set, and we're going to look at some stars and planets in the night sky. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little snippet about Stonehenge and the equinox and the solstices. So don't forget to pay attention to the autumnal equinox, September 23rd. Get those eggs out and see if you can balance those eggs on their end, September 23rd. And equinox means technically equal day, equal night, but just for the record, on the equinox, daytime is actually longer than nighttime, and the quick reason for that is the time of sunrise, sunset is marked when the middle of the sun reaches the horizon. So if you want to find the time when it's, depending on your latitude, it's a couple, 3 days before the equinox, couple, 3 days after the equinox when you actually have the time being basically 12 hours and 12 hours. So a little bit of trivia there. So now we're at night, and there's no particular date that we're talking about here, no particular time except dark during September, and we're looking overhead. And hopefully you remember from last month, from our August show, how to find the summer triangle. And you can go back and watch the August issue. So we have Deneb, which is at the top of the Northern Cross here. And then we have Vega, which is the brightest star in the overhead-ish position, magnitude 0. Deneb is a magnitude 1. And then more towards the horizon is the star Altair, and Altair is featured by having a star on either side of it, easy to find. So those three bright stars make up the summer triangle. So what I want to do in this show in September is help you find three more subtle constellations that I really like. This one right here is the arrow Sagitta. This one right here kind of looks like a kite a little bit, is a dolphin. And then down below, we have the face of a horse. So let me help you out with some lines. And you can see the Northern Cross easily, the harp, the eagle. And now, as you kind of get your bearings from Deneb, which is the top of the Northern Cross, or the tail of the swan, down to Altair, about 2/3 of the way down, you come to Sagitta, which is the arrow right here. You have the tail of the arrow. I look at it as the tail here. Then you have Delphinus. You'll be able to, they're really beautiful to find up in the sky. You have, it kind of looks like a kite with these 4 stars and a little bit of a tail. That's the dolphin. And then down here, you can maybe see the eyes and the nostrils of a horse's face. So to help you with that imagery, let's put up the artwork. And you can see the swan, the harp, the eagle. I didn't talk about the Fox Velpecula. I'll leave that for you to work on. Here's the arrow, Sagitta, the dolphin, Delphinus, and the face of the horse, Equus. So next, it's your job to go out without the lines, without the artwork, and to find it. So you see the summer triangle, Vega to Deneb, down to Altair. This is in the overhead position, so it's not fussy about what time of night or what day of September. It's going to be there all month. 2/3 of the way down, from Deneb down to Altair, we are going to go through Sagitta, the arrow, right here with the 2, 2, and 1 and 1. There's your arrow. Then you see it looks like a kite for the dolphin, Delphinus the dolphin. And then down, keep almost like in a straight diagonal line from Sagitta through Delphinus. We get down to, it's kind of 2 stars for the nose, 2 stars a little further apart for the eyes, Equus. So that's the overhead position for the month of September. Now let's look at some planets. So we're going to 10:30 at night, and the time matters because the planets are rising east, southeast. So Saturn is here, and Saturn is going to rise before Jupiter, and Jupiter's over there. So Saturn is going to be rising as the sun sets. Remember, it was in a position we called opposition, August 27th. So as the sun set, Saturn rises, and that's pretty much true through the month of September. It's going to be rising a little earlier, about 4 minutes earlier each day. So Saturn, a magnitude 0.5, so very bright throughout the month, easy to find. Get a small telescope or come to the McAuliffe Shepherd Discovery Center on the first Friday night of any month, so September 1st. Hopefully you'll see the show in time to get to the first Friday night at the McAuliffe Shepherd Discovery Center in Concord. If not, come the first Friday night in October. And then we have Jupiter, and Jupiter is rising after 10 o'clock or so, and Jupiter is much brighter than Saturn at a magnitude negative 2.8, and it's the brightest object in the eastern sky, unless the moon's in the area. And if you have binoculars, you might be able to see the 4 Galilean moons. A small telescope will definitely show you the 4 Galilean moons. Now, they're in constellations. Let's put up the lines, and we can get an idea, perhaps, of where these things are. So Jupiter is underneath Aries. So I kind of see Aries as like this hockey stick here. And how do I find the hockey stick? Well, the hockey stick is underneath the triangle. See these 3 stars? That's the constellation of Triangulum. It is the one constellation that looks exactly like it's supposed to. It's a triangle. Triangulum, the triangle. Aries, the ram. And underneath we have Jupiter, easy to find. Then, just to point out, we have the constellation of Pegasus, the flying horse. This is the square of Pegasus. We'll talk more about this next month a little bit. We'll talk about the Andromeda Galaxy, which is right here. Then we have Pisces, the fish. So we have this circlet here, which goes down to where the back fins are tied together, and up to this other group of stars making the head of the other fish. So that's the constellation of Pisces. And then Saturn itself, as I step off the screen, is in the constellation of Aquarius. So let's put up the artwork so we can kind of see these things. Pegasus, the flying horse, is the square of Pegasus. Andromeda comes off the left side of the square of Pegasus. We have Triangulum, the triangle, Aries, the ram, and under the feet of the ram, the way it's depicted here, is the planet Jupiter. Then in between, we have Pisces, the fishies, and then, as I mentioned, we have Saturn, and that is in the constellation of Aquarius, right now, the water bearer. So there's your 2 major planets. Again, this is east-southeast, 10:30 or so at night. This is the 15th. This is the middle of September. So things happen a little later at the beginning of the month, a little sooner towards the end of the month. This is 10:30 in the middle of the month. So that's our show. Hopefully you enjoyed that, and you can go out in the night sky and find some stars, find some planets. And I want to sign off with this image from Stonehenge that I already showed you. And this is me. Well, this is me. Let me get out of the way so you can see me. There I am. And so the equinox, September 23rd, the autumnal equinox. Hope that you enjoyed the show. I'm Dave McDonald for the Sky This Month.